She only wanted a moment of joy. In a house where silence weighed heavier than walls, a young girl, daughter of the maid, let herself dance for the first time. Her laughter filled the air, innocent and free. But what she didn't know was that someone was watching. A man with power, wealth, and influence, someone whose reaction could change her life forever. Beside her, the millionaire's own daughter, trapped in a body that no longer moved the way it once did, smiled for the first time in weeks. Two children from two different worlds, sharing a moment that should have been beautiful. Yet in a society where skin color and class often decide worth, beauty can quickly turn to danger. What would happen when the man of the house discovered them? Would he see innocence, or would prejudice blind him to the truth? This is not just a story about a dance. It is a story about power, injustice, and the choices that reveal who we really are. And what happened next left everyone speechless. It was supposed to be just another day in the mansion. Sunlight streamed through tall glass windows, bouncing off polished marble floors that seemed untouchable, distant, like the world of the people who lived there. The millionaire's home was a place of quiet order, where servants moved carefully, never too loud, never too visible. Among them was a maid who worked tirelessly, her hands rough from years of scrubbing, her back aching from bending. But she carried on, because for her, this wasn't just a job. It was survival. Her daughter often stayed with her while she worked. A girl full of life, curiosity, and dreams too big for the narrow hallways she wandered. To her, the mansion was both a playground and a reminder of everything she did not have, of the life she was never meant to touch. Yet she found joy where she could, humming songs to herself, twirling in hidden corners, her small moments of escape from a world that constantly reminded her of her place. On the other side of that same house lived the millionaire's daughter. Once full of energy and laughter, her days had been reshaped by tragedy. An accident had left her body paralyzed, her legs refusing to carry her into the life she once knew. The halls she used to run through now felt like cages. She sat near the windows, watching the world move without her, silence pressing down harder than any pain. Two girls, so different, yet both bound by limitations they never asked for. One, by poverty and prejudice. The other, by a body that had betrayed her. Their paths were never meant to cross in any meaningful way. Yet fate has a way of ignoring boundaries, of breaking open doors that were meant to stay shut. The staff whispered when the girls noticed each other. A friendship between them was impossible, or so the household believed. In a place where lines of class and race were drawn deep, a maid's daughter was never supposed to stand beside a millionaire's child. But still, eyes met. Smiles exchanged. And something began to form, quiet, fragile, but undeniable. What no one knew was that this fragile connection would soon be tested. That a simple act of joy, something as innocent as a dance, would spark a reaction that revealed the darkest truths hiding inside those polished walls. The days inside the mansion followed their usual rhythm, commands from above, silence from below. But beneath that polished surface, something unusual was growing. The maid's daughter began spending more time near the millionaire's daughter. At first, it was by accident, passing her in the hallway, pausing by the window where she sat, silent in her wheelchair. But soon, those moments became intentional. The paralyzed girl, once abandoned to her loneliness, had found someone who treated her as more than fragile. And the maid's daughter, starved of friendship and joy, had found someone who smiled back. Their connection was innocent. Yet in a house ruled by class, power, and unspoken prejudice, innocence was dangerous. The other staff whispered warnings: don't linger too long. Don't forget your place. But how do you tell two children that their laughter is forbidden? One afternoon, when the house was quiet, the maid's daughter began to hum. The tune was soft, but her body moved with it. She twirled, she spun, clumsy at first, then bolder. For the paralyzed girl, it was mesmerizing. For the first time in months, she laughed, not the polite smile forced for doctors, but a real, unrestrained laugh that filled the air. It was a moment of beauty. But beauty rarely goes unnoticed. The millionaire entered unexpectedly. His footsteps echoed on the marble floor, heavy with authority. At first, he saw only movement, a poor girl spinning in the center of his mansion, her bare feet smudging the polished stone. His jaw tightened. And then he saw his daughter's smile, wider than it had been since the accident. The scene froze him. Two worlds colliding in his living room. The silence stretched, heavy, suffocating. The maid's daughter froze mid-step, her heart pounding. She had broken an invisible rule, and she knew it. But what frightened her more was not what she had done, but how he would see it. Would he see a girl? Or would he see just the maid's child, someone too low to belong here? The millionaire's eyes darkened. The weight of years of prejudice pressed into that moment. He saw the class divide, the skin color, the imbalance of power. And in his silence, the fear thickened. The maid, hearing the commotion, rushed in. Her face drained of color. She bowed her head, whispering apologies, pulling her daughter close as if shielding her from a storm. But the storm was already here. He spoke little at first. A sharp command. A threat disguised as control. The air grew colder with each word, and the young girl's joy shrank into fear. The paralyzed daughter tried to intervene, her eyes pleading, her hands trembling. But her voice carried no weight in her father's world. From that moment on, everything changed. The maid's daughter was watched more closely, her every step under suspicion. Tasks became harsher, punishments quicker. Her presence in the mansion shifted from tolerated to unwelcome. And yet, the bond between the two girls only deepened. They shared stolen moments, whispers of comfort, fleeting smiles exchanged across the room. But each moment carried risk. The millionaire's anger grew, not just because of the girl's disobedience, but because her presence challenged something deeper, his pride, his prejudice, his belief in the invisible walls that divided his world from hers. And so, his treatment hardened. A glass left unpolished was suddenly an insult. A floor not shining bright enough became proof of laziness. The maid's daughter was no longer invisible, she was a target. But still, she danced. Not always in the open, not always where he could see, but in secret corners, in shadows of the hall, where her movements were not rebellion but survival. And each time she moved, his daughter's eyes lit up again. Each stolen dance was a reminder, there was still joy to be found, still light in the dark. It was only a matter of time before everything collided again. And when it did, it would shake the mansion to its very core. The mansion had never felt so suffocating. Every polished surface now seemed to mock the maid's daughter, reflecting a world that refused to let her belong. Her small hands trembled as she clutched the edges of the staircase railing, glancing at the paralyzed girl whose wide eyes followed her every movement. They had stolen another moment together, hidden from the servants, hidden from the eyes of a world that insisted they remain apart. But secrets in a house of wealth are fragile things. And tonight, that fragility was about to shatter. The millionaire returned earlier than expected. His silhouette filled the doorway, a shadow cast over the golden light of the hall. He had been warned, or perhaps he had been waiting, either way, the confrontation was inevitable. The maid's daughter froze mid-step, her heart hammering like a drum in her chest. Her mind raced, where should she run? What could she say? But deep down, she knew there was no escape from the truth he would see. For a moment, silence. Heavy, deafening, swallowing all hope of innocence. Then he spoke, not with words of curiosity or understanding, but with a tone sharpened by authority, prejudice, and fear of what he could not control. "What are you doing here?" The young girl's throat tightened. She tried to explain, but the words tangled, choked by the weight of years she had never been allowed to forget. The paralyzed daughter, struggling in her wheelchair, reached out, her small hand shaking, trying to bridge the impossible divide. "She's my friend," her eyes said, pleading for recognition, for justice. He looked at them, and in that glance, a lifetime of inherited superiority, of silent judgments, of unspoken barriers, fell into view. He saw not children, but symbols. The maid's daughter was audacity. The paralyzed girl was weakness. And together, they were a threat to the orderly walls he had built around his family and his world. The first words were harsh, cutting through the air like a whip. Commands followed, stern, unyielding, laden with threat. Go to your rooms. Leave each other alone. Do not speak. Do not move. The maid's daughter, trembling, obeyed at first, retreating to the shadows of the hall. But the paralyzed daughter's laughter, the fleeting joy from earlier, refused to die. She smiled through the fear, and in that smile, a spark ignited. No, the millionaire thought. This cannot continue. And then it happened. He seized her wheelchair, attempting to assert control, to remind the girl, and perhaps himself, who ruled the house. The paralyzed daughter cried out, a sound of terror and defiance intertwined. The maid's daughter, unable to watch in silence, stepped forward. Stop, she shouted, her voice small but unbroken, echoing against the walls. She grabbed the arm of her friend, holding tight, refusing to let the world's cruelty win. For a heartbeat, time itself paused. The silence of the mansion, the tension of years of unspoken rules and prejudice, hung like a storm cloud ready to burst. The millionaire's face darkened, eyes narrowing with anger, disbelief, and confusion. This was not just a disobedience, it was an exposure. A mirror reflecting truths he had refused to see. Innocence had no class, joy could not be contained, and a child's spirit could not be broken by fear alone. Then, chaos erupted. The maid's daughter's defiance collided with his fury. The paralyzed daughter's desperate cry pierced the walls, reaching ears that could no longer ignore the injustice. Other servants, drawn by the commotion, froze, some fearful, some silently judging, some hoping against hope that mercy might prevail. The millionaire's voice rose, a storm of power, threat, and disbelief. I will not allow this, he bellowed. He attempted to separate the girls, to enforce the walls that society, privilege, and prejudice had taught him were absolute. Yet the bond between them, fragile, yet unyielding, held firm. In that charged, suffocating moment, a choice became inevitable. Would he let fear and prejudice dictate the outcome, or would something within him, long buried beneath wealth and pride, finally recognize what mattered most? The mansion held its breath, every polished corner reflecting the tension. Outside, the world remained ignorant of the storm unfolding within these walls. Inside, history itself seemed to pause, waiting for the decision that would mark innocence or injustice, courage or compliance. And then, as the millionaire's hand hovered, and the maid's daughter's grip tightened, the room erupted into a moment so raw, so electric, that nothing would ever be the same again. The final second stretched, a heartbeat frozen in time, as a choice loomed over them all. The mansion was quiet again, but the silence felt different, heavier, more profound. The echoes of that confrontation lingered in the halls, settling into the cracks between the polished floors and high ceilings. Nothing would ever feel quite the same. The maid's daughter sat by the window, her small hands clenched in her lap, trying to process the storm that had passed. She had faced fear, seen the weight of prejudice up close, and yet, somehow, she had survived it. The paralyzed daughter, once confined by her body, had also discovered a different kind of freedom, the freedom that comes from being seen and accepted, even in the eyes of someone who was supposed to judge. In their shared courage, they had found a strength that neither wealth nor status could ever take away. For the millionaire, the experience had become a mirror, reflecting not only the walls he had built around his family but also the invisible walls he had built inside himself. He could no longer ignore what he had witnessed, the unfairness, the injustice, the human cost of prejudice. Whether he would change fully, or only superficially, was uncertain, but the cracks in his certainty had been exposed. The household slowly returned to its routine, but the atmosphere had shifted. The servants moved with quieter confidence, aware now that defiance did not always lead to punishment. They had witnessed that even a child, with nothing but courage and innocence, could pierce the armor of privilege and force the powerful to see the truth. Outside the mansion, life continued as usual. The world beyond the gates remained largely unaware of the struggles within. But the story of the two girls, one bound by circumstance, the other by flesh, remained a testament to resilience, courage, and the refusal to accept injustice quietly. The lessons of that day were not confined to the mansion walls. They echoed far beyond, challenging anyone who might hear them to examine their own assumptions, prejudices, and the invisible boundaries society enforces. It was a reminder that injustice does not always roar. Sometimes, it creeps quietly into daily life, unnoticed, tolerated, and accepted. But when courage confronts it, even in the smallest, seemingly insignificant ways, it can shift perspectives, crack systems, and illuminate the truth. The maid's daughter and the paralyzed girl continued to find moments of joy, small victories in a world that too often tried to deny them happiness. They laughed together, shared secrets, and reminded each other that even in the harshest circumstances, humanity could still shine through. Their bond became a symbol, a quiet rebellion against a world that insisted on dividing people by race, class, and circumstance. And yet, the story does not end neatly. The mansion still stands, the rules still exist, and the world outside remains as complex and unjust as ever. The question lingers: how many children, how many lives, are still constrained by the invisible walls of prejudice? How many more must fight silently for the right to simply be seen, to simply be joyful, before the world truly begins to change? In the end, what happened in that mansion is more than just a story. It is a reflection of the ongoing struggle against racial injustice. It is a call to recognize the humanity in each person, regardless of background or circumstance. It is a reminder that courage, empathy, and compassion can challenge the most entrenched systems of inequality, one act at a time. So, when you look at the world around you, remember the two girls who dared to dance, to laugh, and to claim joy despite fear and prejudice. Ask yourself, where in my life do I see invisible walls, and how will I challenge them? How will I make space for justice, for equality, for humanity? Because if we do not act, if we do not see, if we do not care, the stories, the injustices, the missed opportunities for courage, will continue to repeat. And the world will remain unchanged, until someone decides to break the silence, to open their eyes, and to confront the invisible barriers that divide us.